Emily Kwok, you're in the studio today. I'm so happy.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. You've been coming to Nosara a lot in recent years, or the past year or two, I guess?
Yeah, the last couple of years.
But what you're most known for is you're a 3-time world champion in jiu-jitsu. Somehow or another, you manifested in this little tiny community that we're in. And I'm so happy to have you here. And before we go into your story and today's discussion, I want to thank you for everything you've done for my family. You've taken my daughter Kaya under your wing, and I can't believe the amount of kindness you've shared with my family for, I don't even know why, and I just thank you so much. It really means the world to us. So, 3-time world champion in multiple categories. So you're pretty diverse in your butt kicking, it sounds like.
I guess we could say at different stages of my life, I've continued to kick butt, yeah.
Now, so that being said, you were into boxing?
Boxing. I did a little bit of MMA back in the day. I fought 1 amateur and 1 pro fight back in 2004, 2005. It was tough. I fought in Japan and in Korea. And so nice. I would go to jiu-jitsu tournaments and people wouldn't want to enter the jiu-jitsu tournaments anymore because they would say, well, Emily's going to compete. I don't want to fight against her. I weighed at the time about 145, 150. And most of the women there were probably around 115, 120. And so what started happening was I was having a hard time even fighting at jiu-jitsu tournaments. So a good friend of mine, this guy, Kinya Hashimoto, who's well known in the jiu-jitsu world, said, why don't you fight MMA? And I've always thought I would do anything at least once. So they put me on an amateur card and I won. And then they invited me to go fight on a pro card in Korea. And we did it. And I had a great outcome. But coming back to North America, I didn't know that once you went pro, there was no going back. So when I started trying to get fights in New Jersey, where I'd moved to at that time, I would get a lot of people that would say, yeah, we'll take the fight. And then a week or two later, they would call back and say, we don't want the fight. During that time, this was like 2007, 2008, women's combat sports were just starting to make some headway. Mm-hmm. And the perception of women fighting was really negative. And so it was hard to find a good matchup. So after 3 failed matchups, I should say, I just said, screw this. I'll just concentrate on jiu-jitsu.
Well, it seems like it works. That was a good decision.
I guess so. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a very combative person and I just needed something.
Huh. It's funny because our relationship isn't based off of jiu-jitsu. Well,
no.
You've done a lot for my daughter, my family, and my son. I want to talk about some of the other stuff too, because I know you're on podcasts all the time and TV shows and whatnot, but why are you in Costa Rica? And why do you keep coming back? Like, you're a world champion in something and you could beat up 5-6 people at the same time if you had to, but you keep coming back to Costa Rica and this whole surfing thing. So what's that all about?
I love traveling. I love being in new places and I love trying new things. And I was encouraged to try surfing. And so I tried and I failed really miserably. And I was getting very frustrated. I think surfing and jiu-jitsu might be some of the hardest things that I've ever had to learn. And what often happens in jiu-jitsu, I think also happens in surfing. You have athletes who are very good at doing what they do, but they're not necessarily good at translating that into acquired technical skills and teaching. So in jiu-jitsu, we call it learning through hazing. And I think it's kind of similar in surfing, where it's just come on and watch what I do. You do the same thing. And if you fail, just keep eating the board and the water until you get better at it. And I think my patience for sucking at things has gotten quite low because I've spent so much time training and teaching jiu-jitsu and trying to find more efficient methods. Not to say that there's shortcuts, because both activities require a lot of hours and work, but just that I don't think we're learning as efficiently as we could. We could make it a lot better. I was just finding that lessons were really ambiguous and I just was not understanding what I had to do. I think my time in jiu-jitsu has made me a better student for other disciplines. And now that I've found a great coach, we're working with Ollie Davies at Hidden Coast.
Yes,
he's been incredibly patient. He does seem to listen and care for the needs of the student. I see a lot in jiu-jitsu and the coach sees something in what they want out of the student. But instead of giving them the right pieces to get to where they want them to get to, they will try to push them into a place that they're kind of not ready for just yet. And it's almost like you're getting set up for failure, right? Or a lot of frustration. There's so many conditions in surfing that are variable. And when you're a beginner, you don't even know where to start. I think that one of the biggest holes that we have as teachers is that we often teach, here's what I like to do. We demonstrate and then we go, now copy me. But if you don't actually teach the technical breakdown, and if you don't teach the purpose or the principle, why do you do this? Why does your foot need to be here and not there? Why do you have to grab the elbow and not the collar? It's the same thing as on a surfboard. Why do your toes need to be in the middle of the board and not at the nose of the board? Like, if you don't teach the purpose and the why, the student will never understand what the fuck they're supposed to do.
I'll get you.
A lot of the times when I've learned surfing in the past, it would just be like, okay, we'll just pop up. But there was no articulation as to like detailed where your feet have to be, the direction of your toes,
even where you're looking towards,
where you're looking, where your hands go. And so it just becomes really ambiguous and you just think, I just suck at surfing and it's not for me. My business partner back home who owns my jiu-jitsu school with me, Art Kynes, he gets down here a little bit too to surf.
Yeah, shout out to Art.
Yeah, he loves surfing, but he's a terrible surfing instructor. He took me out surfing on the Jersey Shore and he gives me a board and he's like, come on, just paddle out. And I was like, I was getting pummeled by waves trying to walk out. And I was like, this is horrible. I didn't even know what to do. And he just threw me into the wave and I went flying back to the beach. And then I said, I'm not doing this anymore. Ollie does a great job sort of taking care of us. So the idea of surfing here feels a lot more organized to me. I get frustrated with things when they're too ambiguous. I think surfing is maybe the hardest thing I've ever had to learn because everything is variable. But it's interesting because, in jiu-jitsu, you're fighting a physical force. It's combative versus I think with surfing, it's much more about harnessing, feeling, and listening to the environment in the ocean. You can't fight the ocean. You have to learn to be a lot more receptive, which is one aspect of jiu-jitsu, but the other aspect of jiu-jitsu is to receive and then to oppress, right? Thematically for me, like from learning jiu-jitsu to how I sort of see surfing, it's just a very different sense and feeling. And I think jiu-jitsu is also a lot about enforcing things, and it's funny. I'm at a time in my life now where I have 2 young children. I have another one on the way. And being a parent, you begin to learn and understand that you can't enforce things sometimes, like, especially my children are 3 and 5. They are at the peak of like crazy. Trying to force them to do something is not always the best way versus, like the ocean, understanding, okay, the conditions are a bit variable today. We're not on the same wavelength that we were yesterday. Today we got to try something else. But my youngest one is a piece of work. And with her, I feel like sometimes you have to make her think that whatever you want to do is her idea. She'll resist it at first. Then you just kind of have to manipulate the situation so that she comes around to it on her own. But I feel like that's a lot more like surfing in the ocean because you have to read what's there and then work with it versus with jiu-jitsu, you read what's there, you work with it. But then ultimately, once you turn the corner, you kind of enforce and you get what you want.
How strange is it for you to have this discipline and everyone listen to you and be at your beck and call and look up to you as this multiple world champion, amazing high level person, and they run around and do whatever you say. Then you go home at night and your little kid just could care less and does whatever they want.
Jiu-jitsu is a very one-dimensional culture and world. You have a lot of people who only know jiu-jitsu and only care about jiu-jitsu, and to speak of anything else to them, it just doesn't connect or relate. And you have a lot of very, what I would call like low level or primitive minded people. So there's a lot of negative politics and control issues in jiu-jitsu. It's like thug life. You know what I mean? Like you get beaten and beat out of being parts of associations and teams. And Art and I have been subject to that. And I think because of my past experiences, the way that we've chosen to grow our school now in Princeton, New Jersey, is that we don't want to force people to be with us in that way. There is no, you go to some jiu-jitsu schools and there's a very strong cult-like energy. And what I mean by that is everyone has to wear the same uniform and everyone has to, address the instructors a certain way, and you can't ask questions and you're not allowed to train with people that aren't part of your same team.
Right.
And,
so if someone's from a different school and they walk into another school, they're
not allowed. If Kaya came to my school and I operated this way, she would not be allowed to train at my school because she's not part of my team.
Now, why is that? Because my knowledge is just from you guys, and you guys very much are not like that.
No. So I think there's a very old school mentality that if you are from another team and you come to my school, you're going to hurt my students. It's kind of stupid.
It seems like it's going way back.
Very way back.
So
very
when you
naive.
say old school, like you mean
very
that.
old school.
So kind of primitive minded, very simple, basic thinking.
They kind of brainwash young minds into feeling like they have to be part of this crew, and to not be a part of it, you're excommunicated.
Is that mentality starting to change?
I think so. I mean, there are still a lot of forces within jiu-jitsu that think that way. I would say that there's probably particular families or veins of jiu-jitsu that are more like this than others. But, I said on podcasts 5 years ago, give us 5 to 10 years when we graduate more American or North American, European, Australian, when we graduate people who are into black belts, who are educated, who are not from this old school world, I don't think they're going to tolerate this kind of behavior. And so I'm one of those people. I came up through it, and I've built my school in a way where I won't allow it, So
you're progressive.
Very progressive, very progressive, very open. And I call it sort of an opt-in environment. I don't want you there if you don't want to be there. So, and I will tell that to people when they come in. We give everybody 2 free trial classes, and then, people will do 1 class and then they'll be like, I'm ready to sign up. And I'll be like, look, go check out a few more schools. Make sure this is really what you want.
Gotcha. So you'll do the open slate.
Very open.
And let people kind of, if it fits, then they can dive into the wormhole per se. But if not, they're welcome to go wherever, and you have no...
Yeah, because I have no ill will towards you if you don't feel that our culture is the right fit for you. I think it's a much worse situation to pull and sell somebody into a culture that's not right for them. After a period of time, they might become resentful, or you might start treating them a particular way because they're not totally in on what you guys do. When you and I have talked about simplifying our lives or living in a more frictionless space, like this is a huge part of it, is I want to make sure that if we're the entity that people are coming to be a part of, I want to make sure that the people who want to be a part of it are aligned with our values and who we are, because who I am on the mats is no different than who I am off the mats. Difference might be I know more jiu-jitsu than you. Maybe I'm teaching you something, but I'm not going to be any more or less honest or humorous or whatever. That doesn't change. But there's a lot of schools where on the mats, the master is the master, and don't ask them questions and don't get involved in their personal life. And I just found that was a really oppressive way to be. So we don't choose to be that way at all. And so when, back to how this all started, when we talk about like what's life like on the mats and then going back home, it's all just one big pot of holy shit, everything's just happening. Because I think that, and I think even for my kids, I would much rather have them want to do something that I ask them to do than force them to do it. And that doesn't mean that sometimes mom doesn't put down a firm hand.
Yeah.
But
especially when they're young.
Like I think there's something about like, I love them. I want my children to grow up and have free will and free spirit. But as long as they kind of respect rules of, being civil towards other people. As they get older and they understand these things, I'm happy to give them those freedoms, because especially because they are girls, I want them to be fearless. I want them to be able to feel like they can charge ahead and do whatever they want to do, and that they don't have to be in a circumstance that they don't want to be in.
Now, I'm going to pause you right there, because it seems like whether you did it or they did it themselves or however it happened, it seems like that's happening, especially with Miyoki.
Yeah.
Tell the story about the zip line that you just shared with me. Holy cow.
So we were, this time before we came to Nosara, we went to Arenal and Monteverde. And when we were staying at this resort in Arenal, my oldest, Saya, who's 5, was looking around and she saw people ziplining. She says, Mommy, what's that? And I said, that's ziplining. And she goes, I want to do that. And I said, I think you're a little bit too small. And she's like, when can I do it? When I'm 6? When I'm 9? And I said, I don't know. We'll see. So we drop it. We get to Monteverde. I had signed us up for a Hanging Bridges tour. And as we're getting ready for that, they see, once again, ziplining advertised. So Saya says, Mom, they're ziplining. I want to zipline. And she's like, can we zipline? Am I ready? And I said, I think you're still too small. And she was just like, can you see, please? And then Miyoki's like, me too. And I'm like, you don't even know what ziplining is. So I asked. And they said that they could actually go with a guide.
That's like a good and a bad answer at the same time.
I know. I mean, I was a little shocked because once you start ziplining there, you can't really get off, right? And as a parent, I feared more so, what if they do it once and then they get scared and they don't want to do it anymore, but then we're stuck in a tree canopy, right? But Jerry was like, if they're going to do it, they're like kicking or screaming, they're just going to do it. And I was like, are you guys sure you want to do it? And they're like, yes. So we signed everybody up, and it shocked the heck out of me as a parent. I think even Jerry was probably scared to zipline himself, and then he was doubly scared for the kids. But he was like, this is high. Like, this is scary, because these girls don't even know what they're doing. And it's true. My kids flew through those canopies. I think there was 18 lines in total, and they were so happy, like just absolutely zero fear. Whereas in myself as an adult, I would get to certain treetop landings and I would look down and I'd be like, holy smokes, like, you really don't want to take a wrong
You're
step.
assessing the consequences and the potential things that could go wrong.
Yeah. And it's funny, right? Because I think reflecting on that, you think to yourself, how much, fearlessness, how much boldness do we have as young children that we unlearn or get taught out of as we get older? Because my children, should we be afraid of heights? The safety is a concern, but like the fact that they had no fear about flying through the jungle was kind of beautiful, It's an
interesting point.
And yet all the adults on the tour, like there were like 10 of us, were just, we all thought we were going to die at some point. And these girls just flew. They just had to them, it was just a great time. And at the end of the tour, they have this thing called a Tarzan swing, where they allow you to just basically walk off a platform and you kind of swing right out into the jungle. And Miyoki wanted to do it. Saya said no. So Saya sat with me, and Miyoki went up, and they tied her up, they dropped her harness, and they flew her out into the jungle, and she loved it.
So this is one of those big swings like you see on the internet, where you just drop and huge long.
It's just like a huge swing. Yeah, you just get swung right out over the treetops. And Miyoki started crying because she wanted to go 2 times. And Saya, this was my 3-year-old, and then Saya looked at it and she decided after Miyoki went, okay, I'm going to try it too. But I just couldn't believe the attitude that these kids had, because I'm pretty certain that most adults that I would have been with would have been like, no way, I'm not doing any of this.
Right.
Or like myself and Jerry were like scared the whole time we were doing it.
Right.
Because we're like, oh my God, it's so fast. Oh my God, it's so high. So the fact that my children have that in them, I don't know if it's possible to keep it. I don't know if it'll go away in 10 years, but if they can keep that fearlessness, I would love that.
Yeah, what a good point, because that hit me pretty hard when you were talking about we sometimes learn the fear and absorb it and integrate it into our lives as adults, because I used to not be scared of heights as a kid. Yeah. And now I am petrified. We
learn a lot of bad things, I think, as we get older. Like today.
I kind of wish you never would have said that, because I'm sitting here thinking about it all.
Well, this morning when we were out surfing, there was this kid on the water behind us who was surfing the real waves. Looked like he was 9 or 10 years old, just ripping it. And I just thought to myself, what the, that kid's awesome. And I was like, he's just flying out there. But part of it might be because he has less inhibition about this stuff, right? Versus me. Oh, the wave's going to drop on my head. Oh, I have to turtle roll. This is going to be so tiring. He's just out there doing his thing. And until I was a parent, I don't think I can. And obviously I think training and competing in jiu-jitsu has made me see this. And also in the professional work that I do, that like there are certain qualities that we're born with as children that we should really work hard to maintain, and preserve. And for some reason, whether it's the way that we're raised or institutionalized education.
That's your next book. That's your book. Seriously, that's a good one.
It's a big thing. We lose this, and then as adults, what do we end up doing? We end up sitting here contemplating, how do I get that back?
Oh, I could just tell you right off the bat, I internalized religion. I was brought up pretty religious based. I internalized that so much to where it added a lot of fear into me as an adult. I I did fairly well through my 20s. I worked really, really hard. And then when the economic collapse came, I got obliterated. I'm still not right in my mind from that. Like I still carry that anxiety and fear around. Oh, I don't want to make the wrong decision. I don't want to say the right thing. And that's definitely holding me up today, because like right now we live in this tiny town that by our standards is booming now. Nosara may seem small to you coming in from the States, but from when I first got here to where it is now, it couldn't be more different as far as the type of people coming in, the people having money, and just everything's changing. But I'm too scared to kind of jump into the fray and make projections and take chances, all because I just remember 2007, 8, 9. It's like, hey, no, you're not qualified to say this. No, you just stay quiet. Yeah. And as you're sitting here talking, that's kind of what's internalizing in me right now.
Well, it's interesting is like, so last year when I went and competed at Masters Worlds, it was after 6 years of not competing, and I'd had 2 children, and I decided to make a run for the tournament.
Hold on. How'd you make the decision? Because you're going fast for this story. Let me make sure I understand it right. 6 years off. Yeah. 2 kids. Yeah. And now you're going to go back to compete. Yeah. And I think we met before that happened, and you said that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. We did meet before that happened, and I just decided,
I want to know how you decided that. Like when was the moment where you're like, all right.
I was really inspired by some of my students, because I have a wide range of students that train with us, from little kids through retirees. And I had two students in their late 50s. One's a CEO. One's a retired school teacher who's given birth to 5 children.
Whoa. Shout out to her.
Yeah. And they both just wreck it when it comes to competition. They train when they can, but they'll fly out to any competition that they're able to, and they'll try to fight whoever shows up. And they do really well. And I look at them and I think, well, they both have children. They both have careers. What am I hiding behind, or what have I got to lose? And
your pride, I guess, is one.
And my pride.
Could be embarrassing.
And my pride.
If you, I guess that's it.
Well, you know what it is? I think what happens to a lot of athletes is you do something good. So like, I had a couple titles, or I had a couple great performances. And then you wonder to yourself like, oh, well, can I go back and do it again? And similar to what you're saying here about this trauma that you had, where you were doing well, but then you had one, negative experience or something happened that kind of threw you off your horse. And when I had stopped competing, I was pretty burnt out. And I'd mentioned to you that I'd suffered through some negative politics in my jiu-jitsu career. And there was a period in my life as a brown belt, black belt, where I thought I was going to quit jiu-jitsu because I didn't believe in myself. And so I dropped competition. I focused on having a family. And I looked around at my students. We opened our school in 2010. So we were like, what was it? 2018, 8 years old. We have a wide range of people training with us, and the community is strong. And I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe I should try it.
Your students truly were your inspiration.
Oh yeah, 100%. I looked at them and I was like, why am I not doing this? Because we would go coach them at this tournament in Las Vegas, and I'd done it 2 times, and I thought, I should earn my keep for partying. I should do something. And so I thought, I'll give it a shot.
So did it well up kind of small? Because when we first talked about it, it seemed like you could go 50-50. You were like, I'm thinking about doing this. I'm not sure I'm thinking about it. Like, did it well up kind of small and then grow into, I'm going to do it? Or did you just wake up one day and decide, I'm going to do it?
No, I think there were a couple of things that happened. I contemplated it for a while. I went into my school in New York where, my teacher, Marcelo Garcia, teaches. And there's something also different about being a student of the art and being a teacher of the art. When you go in to train, you have to turn the teacher switch off and be a student. And I think one of my difficulties over the years was being a teacher all the time. So I would go in to train with people, and instead of going hard, the teacher in me would kick in and be like, oh, well, if they do something to me, I should do something to them, and then I should let them do something to me. And then, so there was a mental, I don't want to call it like maybe it was like a bit of a softness there, but I stopped believing in my prowess as an athlete, because I kind of switched tracks for a little while. And so what I did was I went into Marcelo's a few times where everyone there wants to be a world champion. And I thought, I'm just going to go take my teacher cap off and let me just go do it for me today. Let me collect some arms. And I did it. And I left and I thought, for someone not in peak competition form, I didn't do too badly. I was like, maybe if I put a little bit more effort into training, I could do this. So then I started working out a little bit. And then I had a conversation with a couple of pivotal people and said, what do you think? And once I had that support, I thought, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. And part of it was knowing the weight of my decision, because I knew how much work it took for me to compete at Mundial, like at the highest levels. I knew how much I put in. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I always say to myself that I'd learned along the way was, if you're going to go fight, put so much work in that it gives you the confidence when you get out there. I did way more than you. Like, I can look at my opponent and be like, I know I did more than you. And part of my difficulty was gauging how much work I had to put in for a tournament I'd never competed in. I hadn't fought, quote unquote, old people before. I'd always fought people that were younger than me. And so putting myself into an age bracket where everybody was kind of equal, I was like, do I have to fight it? Do I have to train as hard? Do I have to put as much effort in? And it's kind of a little in the dark, But
Did you enjoy that process of kind of being in the dark and wondering about this? Was the anticipation kind of...
I think I just threw myself into it like I would have had I done the Mundials. Like, I had people post-competition say to me, how much training did you do? And I told them, they're like, wow, you trained double what I did. Or you should have just gone and fought in the adult division, And I'm 38 now. I mean, a lot of the people in the adult division are 20, 21. Mm-hmm. And the matches are longer. And, there's always that voice in the back of my head that says, oh, maybe we should go try this out. But, we were talking about pride. It's like, at this point, what have I got to lose? What have I got to gain in competition?
Well, if you asked me that and I was just your friend on the outside, when you're going through this, I would have said the scared side of me, which I'm trying not to operate from so much. Even doing this podcast was a massive amount of me facing fear. Like, I thought about it for years. I knew I needed to do it. I just couldn't hit the button. But going back to, if you had come to me at that time, I'd have been like, well, if you lose, are you going to be as good of a teacher? Are you going to be able to treat your students the same way? Like that pride thing, which when we're just joking about it, doesn't seem like it's a big deal. I'll just face your pride, get past it, rah, rah. The reality is this is your livelihood. This is your identity. This is who you are. So if you had not done well, would that have been some sort of crushing blow and had repercussions all throughout? Would your students looked at you a little bit less? Would you have looked at yourself less? Like,
I mean, I think there's always that doubt and that fear, but that's something that I've been trying to overcome for so many years. Like when I stopped competing, I had that doubt and that fear, and I think it controlled the way that I fought in many ways. Like I was a very inhibited fighter, but
and you said you almost walked away for a little while.
I almost walked away for a while.
But then you faced it. But then when you came back, though, sorry to keep coming back around to this point. Yeah. I'm just really intrigued by it. 6-year break, start a family, 2 kids, a career now at another job. Like, you weren't the same person as you were in your 20s to. You were, I guess.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about elevating the quality of people in your life and lessons that you learn. And one of my dearest friends, Josh, had said to me years ago when I had lost a competition on the same team that we were on, I was sobbing and he'd called me up and he's like, tell me what happened. And I talked to him and I said, I wish I could have won for the team. I just wanted to show Marcelo and the team that I'm not a waste of time. And that all the work that everyone puts into me and all the faith, like, I'm not a waste of time. And if I could have fought like I did when I won the Mundials, the World Championships, I could have made everyone proud. And he said something to me that was really, it's always stuck out to me. He said, you can't, that's the flaw in your thinking. You're trying to be a past version of yourself. And you have to recognize that who you are today is so much more than what you were then. Regardless of the win or the loss, you're just more. And you can't compare yourself to a past version of yourself.
Now, when he told you that, did it hit you right then and it clicked, or did it have to process?
It did hit me then, but I think it's hit me more and more so as I've gotten older and understood myself better.
What a poignant statement.
Yeah. I mean,
it seems like it happened at the exact opportune time for it to have maximum benefit for you too.
And so like things like that, having great friends and having people who have strong influences in your life in the right way. I think I've been really fortunate with that. And I've learned some really huge lessons that have allowed me to be a better competitor, a better teacher, a better person.
But it seems like there's a theme. I want to back up to a statement ago, and I want to ask you this question. Can you talk us through how you started choosing who to associate with and how to bleed off the wrong people? Because what so many of us do is we get around people and we just become comfortable with them being there. They might not necessarily be the right person for your life at that time. If you're someone like me, very, very hard time letting go of any kind of relationship like that, just out of, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to be bad. And we talk about this a lot. So I'd love for anyone listening to kind of hear your take on this.
There's definitely like a people pleaser bone in my body. Some people don't have it. Some people probably laugh at this idea that I do because I think people think that I'm a really candid person, but I do want to be nice to people. But what I've learned, and maybe it's hard for me to not be nice to people who have always been in my life. But since I've kind of decided to live my life a bit differently after some particular experiences, which I'll explain, I've had a much easier time managing it. And so, years ago, we're going back maybe like 10, 11 years when I was with a different jiu-jitsu team. I had been mentally and emotionally abused and manipulated quite badly by the school owner and his wife. And before it got really bad, I had a lot of red flags, like internal red flags. I'd be like, this is weird. This is wrong. Why is this happening?
Did it start as like a small voice?
Oh, yeah.
In your head and it started growing or?
Well, actually, no, I'm not even going to say it was a small voice. It was a voice. It was like, this is not right. I would ask, I would politely sort of try to figure out how to get around the situation. And I would kind of get pushed back. And I was in a bit of a tight situation because I was working there on a work visa. And so in some ways they had a bit of control over me, right?
Yeah.
So I spent a year or two going against my nature. Every time something fell off, I would have to accept it or live with it because of the circumstances I was in. And it got to the point where when they fired me, it was a pretty terrible time in my life. I was losing hair. I was having seizures. I did not believe in myself as a fighter anymore. Like I was a shadow of what I was. I was totally mentally broken. And when I came back from that, I think it's an Oprah quote, but I use it all the time.
Let's give a shout out to Oprah then.
Someone said to me, you have to teach people how to treat you. And so I've kind of lived with that ever since. That after that experience, everyone that I have encountered since then, if you want to call it maintain a short leash, people that know me will say, man, Emily, she don't let you get away with shit. And it's true because I'm going to call you on whatever it is right away. Not because I'm trying to be rude, not because I'm trying to embarrass you, but because you need to know this is my line, dude. Like if you cross it, I'm going to push you back over the line because if I don't, you're going to take a step in too deep and then you're going to keep taking further steps in until you make me uncomfortable.
I got you. So doing that right away.
Just kind of, it just kind of sets the boundary of like, oh, okay, cool.
It seems like you prefer authenticity as well.
Oh, 100%. I would much rather you do terrible things to me and then come to me and apologize for all the terrible things that you did versus just pretend and be nice to my face for the rest of King and Come. Like, I don't appreciate people that can't come to terms with their mistakes or who they are as a person. Like, if I'm wrong, I'll apologize.
Now, does that come from your passion for inner growth and how you've directed, especially this part of your life with what you're working on now? You're always advancing and you're always finding a way to trim the fat, for lack of better words.
Yeah. And I think it also has to do with how I was raised. I grew up in a very conservative Asian household, and my father was someone my family didn't communicate. So my father would harbor this anger towards me for, let's say I'd done like 20 different little things wrong around the house, left the tea towel somewhere, didn't put toilet paper in the bathroom, whatever it is. And instead of telling me in that moment how to correct my behavior, he would wait until the problem became so big that he would just explode. And it would just be this massive fight. And then he'd shoot me down with 500 things that he didn't like about me. And I was a teenager, and I was like, this seems like dumb. Like, why, if you don't like something that's quite small about somebody or something that they've done, why not deal with it when it's small, when it won't hurt anyone, and teach them versus save it all and then try to blast them with it?
Was it because he was scared of conflict?
Yeah. I mean, growing up, from what I understand, his father was an alcoholic, and I think my father pushed his buttons a lot, and he was used to blowback. So I think he was conditioned to sort of hold, harbor, and then blow up. I gotcha. And I was just like, I don't want this in my life. And so as a young person, I've always been the opposite. You know, I tell people what I think right away. So, maybe I've gained a reputation sometimes for being, you know, people will be like, Emily's a bitch, or she's this or that. And I'm like, I didn't insult you. I just told you something you didn't want to hear.
Right. You were trying to be real and actually appreciate the relationship, as opposed to just have, I'm just going to hold this in and let it kind of add up, and then we either grow apart or have a blow up. Yeah. And so I do appreciate authenticity a lot in people. I think the people that get that, we can become fast and firm friends. How can you tell when someone's being authentic? Because you meet so many people. Like, you meet tons and tons of people. You're an icon in what you do. So you have a lot of the same conversations over and over again. Like, how do you get to the root of do I want to be around this person or do I not? Is this person just kind of going through the motions? Like, how do you find which relationships are real and which ones you want to hold on to? I mean, I think there's a certain amount of relatability that some people come to you with, where they treat you as an equal and they're not looking up at you, or they're not asking something of you, or they're not trying to get something from you. I've been duped a couple times, you know, like I don't see myself. My husband tells me this. He's like, you don't see yourself the way that you are, like what people think of you. And well, that's like, interesting. That point in itself. Yeah. Did he say that early in the relationship or post kids? I would say notoriety's grown over the years, you know, like as I've been with him, my reputation has probably grown. I got you. So you've changed. Matured. Right, okay, yeah. Okay. I mean, I think the most significant thing was I made this DVD with an old friend of mine, Stefan Kesting, back in 2010. And it's gotten a lot of play and a lot of exposure. And it's made my name very familiar with people. And so it's been wonderful from a legacy standpoint in terms of meeting people, doing seminars, having some notoriety, and being able to have a career, you know. But on the flip side, it's kind of weird sometimes being a little, I don't know if you want to call it like a mini celebrity in like a little niche community, because I do meet some people who have pulled the wool over my eyes a little bit in the beginning, you know, and appeared to be someone who wanted to be a genuine friend, but then having to find out on the back end that they were massaging or manipulating the circumstances around you so that they could get something for themselves. Yeah, someone in your situation, that's not uncommon. So how do you deal with that? Well, I know how you deal with it now. How did you deal with it 6 years ago? Well, you know, I've had a couple situations where I've confronted individuals, and if they're not able to just come clean, then we just get cut out. That's back to what you said earlier. If somebody will admit and say, hey, I have no problem accepting you with your faults, you know, like, but you got to be real with me. Like you could be like, Emily, I just shot a dog. And I'd be like, that's a terrible thing to do. But if you trust me deeply as a friend, like if you're the friend that I think you are, or if I'm the friend to you that I think I am, I feel like there's a certain intimacy that we have where we can trust each other on a deep level. I got you. Is your barometer for authenticity this what you're describing right now? Like, what's a better way to say it? Because I'm really interested, because you meet people quickly and you have to figure out, do I want to continue this, even the dialogue, or is this just, it was nice to meet you, see you, bye? Yeah. I'm really interested in how you deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've gotten better at sensing when there's a mutual exchange or a gift or like a sensibility there, you know? And it's usually both ways. You know, like one of my dearest friends, he's an attorney in New York named Andrew. We had been traveling in the same circles in the jiu-jitsu world for a long time, but had never formally hung out or met. And I ran into him at a birthday party for someone else, and he was there with his family. I was there with mine. We had about 10 minutes of interaction, but he had walked right up to me and said, "Hey, I've really been looking forward to meeting you for some time." And he's like, "We have to go, but I'd love to set up some time to hang out with you and your family." And I'd be like, "Great." Like, it was just a very direct, sincere, no like massaging the entry. It was like, "I've wanted to meet you. Let's get together." And I appreciate that, you know, and since then we've become really great friends.
That's cool.
But I think that there is just that genuine sincerity and sort of your motive can be out there, you know, like, I want to get to know you. And I've said that to some people that I want to get to know. Like, I think you're fascinating. I'd love to get to know you more. And they're like, I think the same way of you, you know? So I think there's a sense that I've learned to, it's sort of a bit of a spidey sense, but it's made my relationships a lot less stressful.
So how, kind of flip it around though. How do you get out of one quick? Like, how do you go through tonight? You'll probably meet 20 people wherever you're going to go. How do you just nip it in the bud without that awkward?
Yeah, so
I don't know how to describe exactly what I'm saying. Do you kind of pick up what I'm saying at all?
And I've spoken to various people and like therapists about this too. But this idea that, you know, they're like, I've been told your energy is very open, and you have if you're not careful with shutting your energy down, everybody will just come take a piece of you. And it's true. I feel that.
And you don't have time for that.
No.
2 kids.
And I'm drained, you know? And
You have so much going on.
So one of the things that I think I pay attention to is it's more of an internal thing than maybe external. I just know whatever mood I'm in, I'm either, hey, Emily's going to open the floodgates, and today people are going to feel my energy vibrate and radiate, and I'm going to be inviting people in to come sit and talk with me at the table. Or other days I'm there with a book or with my family, and I'm just like internally, I'm shut down. Like,
Gotcha.
I just want to be here. I don't want to invite other energy into this. And
so you basically just go off of how you feel, and you just be in that moment. This is who I am, and it's okay. And you don't offer any apologies.
No, I don't. I mean, I don't want to have to offer apologies to anybody, you know? Like, I'd like to think that every interaction I have is genuine. And
were you always that way? Because on the flip side, I always feel like I need to apologize. I can't hang out. I can't make this. I have a hard time saying no. I take on way too much responsibility and throw myself under the bus here just because I don't want to say no. And it's added up. It's really added up, and it's become a problem.
I think I've learned the subtle art of no, like subtraction. No is something that I play a lot too, because I'm very much, you know, a social butterfly, and I'll be like, yes, 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 let's try this, let's do that, yes, 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 let's keep going. And I'm also I don't like flakiness either, right? So if I commit to something, I'm going. Like like I told you yesterday, I had a terrible fever, but I'm like, if I wake up tomorrow morning and I'm okay, I'm still doing this, you know, like I don't like to be that person. And so if I give you my word, it's usually my word is bond. And as I've gotten older, I think, and more mature, I think what I've tried to do is just be less, I don't want to say less generous with my time, because I think I'm very generous with the people I'm with, but I just don't throw my energy everywhere that it doesn't need to be. And I've tried to concentrate it more on holistically what makes me feel better, what makes me feel more energized. There are a lot of people around that I think are like energy vampires, and like I'll hang out with them for a couple hours and I'm drained. A handful of individuals in my life, I hang out with them and they make me radiate from the inside out because they give me so much. Okay. And so I'm careful to like balance who I'm spending my time with. And also, if I can kind of get the sense that somebody's a bit of a needy energy, I just shut it down a little bit, you know, or I distance myself.
Did you have to give yourself permission to do that? Is it just very, very cut and dry? I
think after having a couple negative situations occur, that was enough evidence for me to say, I don't need to do this. why am I doing this? This is a waste of my time.
So, well, that's part of why your story is so fascinating to me, because you've had these heavy transitory periods in your life, but to get that transition to happen, you went through something very, very dynamic.
Yeah.
And you seem to spring forward out of things. So something happens and then you move forward in a big way. And even from going back to competition one more go around, that was a big freaking step. And now here you are.
Yeah.
It still was a risk. I mean, you can downplay it and be humble, but
you know, back to the competition thing, the one thing I wanted to say that, you know, when I brought that up was, coming back to fight after so many different periods of fear or trauma or disbelief in myself, putting the energy in. And I wrote an essay about it called Becoming the Conscious Competitor. You know, I think before I competed last year, I did things very naively. And what I mean by that is I just kind of lived life and I took it and I was just like, everything's cool. We're living. Everything's good. But I didn't really study or like look back on I wasn't looking at the feedback. I wasn't seeing whether or not these were great experiences. I was just living them. Does that make sense? Like I was just taking
actually,
life.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does.
I was just taking life as I saw it. Right. And becoming a conscious competitor to me was like this idea of, I've lived these experiences. I know what I've done right. I know what I've done wrong. I'm going to go back into this arena, but I'm going to go back as a more educated competitor because I have all these other experiences to fall back on that should inform my process now. And so I think about that and it actually made me a much stronger competitor after overcoming that, because I was able to take all the positive and negative feedback that I had and I infused it into this new experience. And I was like, I'm going to overcome this. I'm going to go fight and not be the inhibited fighter that I was before. And I think
there's probably some freedom in that.
Yeah, well, tons of freedom. And it's actually put me on a new level because, you know, in April, right before I found out that I was pregnant, I actually jumped into a tournament last minute in New York and I won that as well. So I was disappointed in some ways about finding that I was unexpectedly pregnant because I kind of wanted to test myself again, because there's a certain amount of mental freedom that I feel like I have now that I never had before. There's a real confidence about it. And I think it really does come from this conscious competitor.
Wow. So that's going to be like the next level of what you're sharing in your academy and elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, and I want, the
story kind of continues.
Story continues and you can reinvent yourself and you can be more than what you were, right? And I think that when we talk about all these life experiences and you've said, well, you kind of leap forward because in some ways life is like a competition, right? Like why have I competed? Because when I've competed, I've learned so much in those moments, in those 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I learn what works and what doesn't work. And so when I live my life, like when I translate that back to life, I go, okay, I had this, episode. It was 5 days or 5 months or whatever. That worked. That didn't work. We're not doing that again, And I think it's kind of trained my body and my soul to sort of not repeat redundant, detrimental mistakes over and over again.
I got you. And competition has served as an acceleration tool. That's probably not a strong enough word.
Yeah, no, 100. I think if you talk to anyone who likes to compete or who has, I shouldn't say likes to compete, who can appreciate what competition has done for them, they will tell you that they've learned so much in those moments, preparing for it and then fighting. It's a lot of work to prepare for those 5 minutes. But then when you go fight it out, you come back out of it and you're like, wow, like this is really working. This is not working so well. And it gives you a marker. And then you say, okay, now that I'm here for the next competition or for the next thing, I've got to prepare and get to here. But without that marker, if you don't compete, you're just kind of swimming in this circle of like, okay, we're just hanging out.
With everything you're saying right now, well, actually, no, instead of me, I'll think about like for my kids. Elisha just went to his first jiu-jitsu tournament. And he's done a lot of karate tournaments. He's always won everyone. And he just got so used to winning. He doesn't really even think through the process. He just shows up, he wins, he gets these medals, and he dances around, and that's that. He went to a jiu-jitsu tournament, lost. Some kid jumps up, gets him in an armbar immediately. He's never lost before. So he was stunned by that. And then the tournament that he was at, there were 2 speakers going. He couldn't tell where to be. It was our first jiu-jitsu tournament, and he was in the wrong side. So then he gets disqualified from his next match. And he didn't mind the loss so much, but he was devastated over the word disqualified. He didn't really know what that meant. He was trying to be there. He just was in the wrong spot. So then at the award ceremony, he was in the other spot. So it was just like 3 heavy hitting things he's never dealt with once in his life before. And it was like a bad day for my family. Like my wife is just like, what?
Yeah.
And all the tournament experiences have been victorious. And now here he's had the worst day of his life. But at the same time, by the time we're walking out of, I guess, the gym or whatever you call it, he was dancing again. And he learned a ton. And his perspective changed. And it just became all right, well, we learned. And
you learned so much from losing.
The way I was describing it I was talking to Eric the other day, and I was just saying, on the surface, it was the worst day ever to see your kid be in physical pain, then emotional pain, and then in tears. And it's kind of your fault. Like everything about it was bad, but I'm so glad every bit of it happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think as a parent, for me, those moments of bounce back or resilience are super important. You know, like Saya had come to me and said she wanted to compete we had like a small in-house tournament at the school. I didn't think to put her in it, but she wanted to do it. And I let her do it. And she was the smallest kid. She lost every match, but she never stopped fighting. And I was so proud. You know, I was so proud because I was like, if you can take a boy throwing you on your face and you can get back up and keep fighting him, that's way more than I need than to see you win a gold medal.
So what would you say to the people out there who are scared to compete? Because everything we just talked about was unpleasant as parents to watch, but at the same time, it was the best thing for our kids. What would you say to those kids and other people, and even adults out there who were scared to jump into the fire of whatever their life may?
Well, you know, I think competition at its core is probably one of the most confrontational activities you can do as a person. And you think that you're fighting somebody else, but the reality is you're fighting yourself, because you can't perform if you can't get past your own psychology. And so that's a scary thing.
How do you do that?
You gotta give it a try. Yeah, you gotta give it a try. And I think there's certain things that you can do to practice getting into that space where, you know, you train a certain amount of hours, or you're training in wrestling and in jiu-jitsu, and you're preparing yourself so that you know that when that moment happens, you have these tools to fall back on. You know, like there's things that you can do, but it's always scary. You know, any world champion that tells you that they don't have a little anxiety or fear before they fight is lying to you, because it's real. Fear makes things real, right? Like fear indicates some change or ambiguity, or we don't know what's going to happen. And I think it just gives you I don't think it's always a bad thing. I always say doing everything in life with a little bit of fear is really good, because it tells you that you're growing a little bit.
Right. I would add to that and say, without fear, it's hard for it to be fun.
Yeah.
Like right now, if we go surfing on a basic day, I really don't have that much fun. I just don't.
Yeah.
There's nothing to be scared of. I've gotten used to it, but throw in a couple variables that you have to overcome, and that's what makes it fun. I guess I'm making that whole point that it's not the journey, it's the destination. I hate those cliches because everybody could just say it.
But they're there for a reason.
Well, we circled back to another one with you. It was kind of, when I was a kid, my dad used to say, PPE. I didn't know what he was talking about. It's like plan, prepare, then expect. But most people expect without the planning or the preparation. And it comes back to what you said earlier. It's all full circle. The way to deal with this is to face your fears head on, jump into the competition. But before you jump into the competition, prepare as much as you possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that
100%.
seems to be what you just did to win your 3rd world championship.
Yeah. There's ways to do it, but it requires our attention and our focus. And I guess at some point, you know, for me, not being naive about it.
I want to thank you for your time. We'll definitely have you back. I want to get an update on your surfing.
Yes.
Congratulations on number 3 above all else. You have a lifetime of babysitters and aunts and uncles. You guys are welcome down here. You got support.
Thank you.
Just keep coming. And again, from the bottom of my heart and from my wife, thank you for what you've done for our family.
Thank you.
You really didn't have to do that, and we'll never forget it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.